Welcome to Generative AI Futures.
It's great to be here.
I was looking at my cloud bill the other day and then reading about the energy these data centers are pulling, and it just hit me.
Oh, yeah.
We are so deep in this bigger is better phase of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, every week it's a new model, GPT-4, Gemini, Claude Opus, and they're all absolute giants.
Digital leviathans, really.
Exactly. They're brilliant, don't get me wrong, but they're also enormous, expensive, and they need like a small power plant just to answer a simple question.
And that's the defining problem of the whole AI landscape right now. We've cracked the code on, let's say, raw intelligence, but we've done it by building these monsters.
Right, and that's the problem I really want to dig into today. Because I can't run one of those monsters on my phone. If you're a developer or just someone who wants a smart assistant that doesn't need an internet connection, you're pretty much out of luck. But we have this stack of research in front of us that claims there's a way out, a way to take these giants and shrink them down without making them stupid.
Exactly. We're talking about knowledge distillation. And while it sounds like something from a chemistry lab, you could argue it's the single most important technique for the future of, well, AI being everywhere.
Knowledge distillation. Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is clear. How do you take a brain the size of a warehouse and fit it into a pocket? We're going to trace this from its mathematical roots all the way to modern LLMs.
And the best place to start is, funnily enough, a paper from 2015 by Jeffrey Hinnon and his team. It's really the foundational text for this whole field.
And what I love about this paper is it starts with a biology lesson. I did not expect a paper on neural networks to be talking about bugs.
The insect analogy. It's a classic for a reason. It frames the problem perfectly. Hinton basically compares machine learning models to the life cycle of an insect.
Okay, let's walk through this. You start with the larval stage.
Right. Think of a caterpillar. What's a caterpillar designed to do?
Eat, grow, get absolutely huge.
Precisely. Its whole job is just extracting nutrients from the environment. It's bulky, it's slow, super energy intensive. In AI, that's our training stage.
So GPT-4, when it's learning from the internet, is a caterpillar.
It's a caterpillar chewing through petabytes of data, absorbing everything. It doesn't care about efficiency at all, just information.
But you don't want to be a caterpillar forever. I mean, if you want to travel or reproduce, being a fat, slow worm is a bad strategy.
A very bad strategy. You need to metamorphose into the adult stage, the butterfly. The adult form is optimized for being lightweight, for agility. And Hinton's big point was that for years we were doing it wrong. We were training the caterpillar and then deploying the caterpillar to users.
Which explains why these models are so slow and expensive. We're using the training-optimized monster for the deployment phase.
Correct. We should be distilling that massive clunky knowledge into a lightweight adult model, a student model.
So the teacher is the caterpillar, the student is the butterfly. Makes sense. But here's where it gets really fascinating, and maybe a little mathematical. How do you actually move the brain over? Because the paper mentions something called dark knowledge.
Dark knowledge. It sounds very sci-fi, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it really does.
But it's about the hidden information in a model's mistakes.
The mistakes. I thought the whole point was to get the right answer.
It is. But let's look at how a neural net thinks. Say we show a huge teacher model a picture of a BMW.
Okay, picturing a BMW.
The model processes it and spits out probabilities for every category it knows. It'll say, with super high confidence, this is a car, like 99%.
And that other 1% is just,
Yeah.
it's noise, right? It's 0.001% dog, 0.001% apple, whatever.
That's what we used to think. We just treat those tiny numbers as zero. But Hinton realized that the distribution of those tiny errors is actually a map of the world.
What do you mean by that?
Well, imagine the model assigns a tiny probability to garbage truck, say 0.0001%, but an even tinier one to carrot, like 0.000000001%.
Okay, so it thinks it's extremely unlikely to be a carrot, but only very unlikely to be a garbage truck.
Exactly. And that ratio tells us something profound. It tells the student model, hey, even though this is a BMW, it looks a lot more like a garbage truck than it looks like a carrot.
Because it has wheels and a metal body.
It shares visual features with the truck. It shares nothing with the vegetable.
I see. So that's the dark knowledge. It's the hidden relationships between the wrong answers that define the actual shape of the object.
Yes. If you only train the student on the hard target, just telling it the answer is car, you lose all that nuance. The student gets the right answer, but it has no idea why or how the teacher got there.
So how do you get this student to actually pay attention to those tiny numbers? Because a computer would normally just round that down to 0 and move on.
This is where we get into the math of logits and temperature.
I saw temperature in the papers. This isn't about, like, heat in the server room, is it?
No, it's a parameter in the softmax function. So before a neural network gives you those nice probabilities, it generates these raw scores called logits. To turn those logits into percentages that add up to 100, we run them through softmax.
And usually the temperature parameter is set to 1.
Right. At temperature equals 1, the function is aggressive. It pushes the likely answer way up to 99% and squashes all the others down to near 0. It creates a very spiky distribution.
Which hides the dark knowledge.
Exactly. So the trick in knowledge distillation is to raise the temperature. You set T to 2 or 5 or even higher, and you soften the curve.
You melt the peak.
You melt the peak. The 99% comes down, and those little bumps for garbage truck and carrot rise up. Suddenly, the student model can clearly see the relationship. It sees the whole landscape of the teacher's decision-making.
So you train the student on these soft targets.
Yeah.
You're forcing it to match the teacher's softened probability distribution, not just the final answer.
And the math shows, this is the beautiful part, that when the temperature is very high, you're essentially just minimizing the squared difference between the logits of the teacher and the student. You're aligning their internal view of the world.
That's amazing. So back in 2015, this was mostly for images, right?
Wow.
Identifying cats and cars. But we're not in 2015 anymore. We're in the age of generative AI. We're dealing with large language models.
And this shift to LLMs brings a huge new problem, the black box problem.
Right. In Hinton's day, you usually own the model. You could look inside and see the logits. But today, if I want to distill knowledge from GPT-4, well, I can't. OpenAI isn't going to send me their logits.
Not a chance. They just give you the text output.
So models like Llama or Mistral, those are white box because they're open source. But the big proprietary ones are black box. We send a prompt, we get text back. That's it.
And we have no idea what the internal probability distribution looks like.
So the classic temperature trick just doesn't work. We can't access the raw numbers to soften them.
Precisely. So, according to this big survey by Lou and their team, the whole industry had to pivot. We've moved from soft targets to data augmentation.
Data augmentation. So we're just adding more data? Sounds a bit simpler.
It's a total paradigm shift. Since we can't access the teacher's internal brain, we use the teacher as a content creator. We basically treat the teacher model like a textbook writer.
So instead of trying to copy the teacher's brainwaves, we just ask the teacher to write a really good curriculum for the student.
That's a perfect way to put it. Let's say you want a small model that's great at summarizing news articles. You don't have millions of perfect summaries lying around.
Right.
So you take a small seed of articles, you feed them to the Just Teacher model, and you say, write perfect summaries for these, and then generate 1,000 more articles and summaries just like them.
You're synthesizing your own training data.
You are. The teacher generates context-rich examples, diverse instructions, complex dialogues. The student then trains on all this synthetic data. It's literally learning by reading the textbook written by GPT-4.
So that's the bridge. It connects the closed source world and the open source world.
It's the primary bridge. It lets us transfer the capabilities of the giants into models that can actually run on a laptop.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here. If the student is just reading the teacher's output, isn't that just rote memorization? I mean, if I memorize a physics textbook, I can pass the test, but do I really understand physics?
That is the critical question. Are we transferring facts or are we transferring reasoning? And the latest research shows we're really moving toward the latter. We're transferring chain of thought.
Chain of thought, right? This is one of my favorite ideas in AI. It's where you ask the model to show its work.
Exactly. If you just train a student on the answer x equals 5, it learns nothing. But with distillation, we can prompt the teacher model to explain its steps. First, I calculated A, then I put that into formula B, and finally I got 5.
And you train the student on that whole explanation.
The whole thing. The student learns the logic, and the research points to a method called LMSI, which takes this even further.
How does it do that?
It actually prompts the teacher to generate multiple reasoning paths for the same problem. It's like asking the teacher to brainstorm 5 different ways to solve a math equation.
And then what?
Then it checks which of those paths lead to the right answer most consistently, filters out the confusing or just plain wrong logic, and then uses only the best, most coherent reasoning to train the student.
So it's not just copying the teacher, it's curating the teacher. It's filtering out the teacher's bad habits and only keeping the A-plus logic.
It is distillation in the truest sense. You are boiling off the impurities and keeping the essence of the reasoning.
Okay, now there's another skill that we need to transfer that's maybe even more important than math, and that's values. Ethical alignment.
Oh, absolutely.
We want these models to be safe, right? We don't want them teaching people how to build bombs.
And distillation is becoming the standard for safety training. There's a technique called RLAIF reinforcement, learning from AI feedback.
I've heard of RLHF human feedback,
Mhm.
where you have armies of people clicking, this is good, this is bad.
Which is slow, expensive, and frankly, psychologically taxing for the labelers. RLAIF replaces the human with the teacher model.
The teacher becomes the safety inspector.
Yes. The teacher model reviews the student's potential outputs and just ranks them. Response A is helpful and harmless. Response B is toxic. It creates a preference data set that the student learns from.
And because the teacher model, like a GPT-4, has already gone through massive safety training, it has a kind of built-in moral compass.
Exactly. It passes that alignment down to the student. It allows open source developers to build models that can approximate the safety standards of the big tech companies, but without a multi-million-dollar budget for human labeling.
That's huge for democratization. Okay, so we got the math, the reasoning, the safety. Let's talk about specific jobs. Because when I use a general model, it's great at chit-chat. But if I ask about, say, a complex legal clause, it gets a little fuzzy.
That's the verticalization trend. General-purpose models are a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. But in fields like law or healthcare or finance, fuzzy isn't good enough. Fuzzy gets you sued.
The survey mentioned a model called Lawyer Llama, which, first of all, fantastic name.
Great name, and it's a specialist. Legal language is practically its own language. A general model might miss the nuance of a liability clause. Lawyer Llama is fine-tuned on legal texts, but critically, it uses instruction data distilled from a larger model that was specifically prompted on complex legal reasoning.
So it learns the jargon and the logic of law.
It does. And we see the same thing in healthcare with a model called GPT.
GPT.
Yes. In medicine, you have messy, real-world data patient notes, lab results. GPT combines that real data with distilled instructions from ChatGPT to structure it all. It lets a smaller model act like a senior resident, interpreting complex queries that would normally stump a generalist.
And in finance, there was Swan-Yuan.
Swan-Yuan is fascinating because it focuses on cause and effect. In finance, it's not enough to know a stock went up. You need to know why. Swan-Yuan uses self-instruct data to learn these causal chains so it can predict trends, not just repeat history.
We've been very text-focused. But the world is multisensory. The research mentioned cross-modal distillation, and there was one example that really stuck out to me with 3D sensing.
Yes. SimDistill. This is where distillation starts to feel almost like a superpower.
This is for autonomous vehicles, right?
Right. Ideally, a self-driving car has LiDAR, laser scanners, radar, all the high-res cameras. It sees the world in perfect 3D. But that hardware costs thousands of dollars.
And if we want robots in our homes or cheaper self-driving cars, you can't put a $10,000 laser on every unit. They might just have a simple camera.
Exactly. So SimDistill uses a teacher model that has access to everything, the LiDAR, the lasers, the perfect depth map. But the student model, it only sees the camera feed.
So the student is partially blind compared to the teacher.
In a way, but during training, the teacher forces the student to predict the data it can't see.
Wait, so it teaches the student to hallucinate the depth?
In a controlled way, yes. The student learns to associate the flat 2D image with the 3D depth. It learns when a car is this size and the shadow is at this angle, it's exactly 15 meters away. It transfers the interpretation of a sense it doesn't even have.
That is wild. It's like teaching a deaf person to feel the vibration of music so well they can basically hear it.
That's a beautiful analogy, and it allows cheap hardware to punch way above its weight class.
Speaking of speed and efficiency, we have to talk about image generation, diffusion models.
Right. Think about Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. When they generate an image, they do it in steps. They start with static noise and slowly, over hundreds of steps, refine it into a picture.
Which is why it takes 30 seconds or a minute to get an image.
Exactly. But with distillation, we can compress those hundreds of steps into just a few. The teacher basically says, here's the start, and here's the final masterpiece. Figure out how to jump straight there.
And the student learns the shortcut.
It learns to collapse the process. This is why we're suddenly seeing real-time image generation on laptops. We've distilled a marathon into a sprint.
Okay, we're in the final leg of our deep dive, and this is where things get a little meta. We've talked about the teacher and student, but the research mentions when the relationship gets adversarial. Adversarial distillation.
This is the frontier. This is where we stop treating the student like a passive learner and start playing a game.
A game.
Yeah, it's inspired by Jan's generative adversarial networks. You have a generator and a discriminator. The generator tries to create synthetic data that looks exactly like the teacher's original training data. The discriminator tries to spot the fakes.
Why do that? Why not just give the student the original data?
Privacy. This is the killer app for medical or financial AI. Imagine the teacher was trained on private patient records. You cannot legally share that data. You can't just hand it over to a student model that you're going to release to the public.
So you need the knowledge, but you can't touch the source material.
Exactly. This is data-free distillation. Through this adversarial game, the teacher guides the generator to create new, entirely fake data that captures the statistical patterns of the real patients without containing a single real name or condition.
So the student learns from a synthetic echo of the data, never the data itself.
Correct. It solves the privacy bottleneck.
That's incredibly clever. But there's one last concept that I found even more provocative. Self-distillation. This sounds like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps.
It essentially is. We're finding that models can be their own teachers.
How does that work? If I don't know the answer, how can I teach myself the answer?
Well, think about your own internal monologue. You have a lot of thoughts. Some are smart, some are nonsense.
Most of mine nonsense, unfortunately.
A model's the same. It's noisy. In self-distillation, a model might generate 5 potential answers to a question. Then it uses a filter. The research mentions a method called impossible distillation to critique its own work.
So it acts as its own editor.
It does. It looks at its 5 answers, figures out which one is the most consistent, coherent, and high quality, its best self, if you will, and then it retrains itself on those best answers.
So it suppresses its own noise and reinforces its own signal.
It creates a feedback loop. The model progressively refines its own knowledge, becoming less dependent on human-labeled data and more dependent on its own internal quality checks.
That brings us to the big takeaway. We've gone from insect larvae to self-improving AI. What does this all mean for the person listening right now?
The immediate impact is democratization. For the last few years, the big fear was that AI would be a monopoly, that only the companies with the billion-dollar server farms could run the caterpillars.
Because they were the only ones who could pay the electric bill.
Right. Knowledge distillation breaks that monopoly. It means the reasoning capabilities of a GPT-4 can be distilled into a model that runs on a phone in a rural clinic or a laptop in a classroom.
It closes the gap between state-of-the-art and actually useful.
It puts the intelligence where we actually live on the edge in our devices, not just locked away in the cloud.
But I want to leave you with one final thought based on that last section. We talked about models generating their own training data because humans can't share the originals. And we talked about models acting as their own teachers, filtering their own thoughts to get smarter.
I see where you're going with this.
If the student can distill its own knowledge, improve itself without any new human data, and generate its own curriculum, are we approaching a point where the loop closes, where AI evolution becomes entirely self-contained? I mean, does the student still need us to grade the homework?
That is the ultimate question. When the student becomes the master, the curriculum is no longer ours to write.
Something to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into knowledge distillation.
It was a pleasure.
Until next time.